Kevin, it's really emotional scenes there from Japan as well. That's their first ever World Cup win on European soil. It's also their first victory against the South American side at the tournament. And we told you before as well that they heard news yesterday of 3 people who died in that earthquake in Osaka, 6.1 magnitude earthquake. And their coach had said he wasn't sure how psychologically they would deal with that. Well, they've been particularly good in that second half. And they've seen off Colombia, who, yes, were down to 10 men earlier in the game, but quarter-finalists, as Steve said, in the last World Cup. But they've lost the first game, and largely thanks in part to a really good second-half performance from Japan.
It was. I thought they deserved it in the second half. We thought Colombia shaded the first half, but I think the extra man in the second half, Japan kept possession of the ball. They got control of central midfield. We didn't see anything of James or Falcao in that second half. And I think you saw the emotion at the end there. It was similar to Mexico. That's how big this result is for these Japanese footballers.
It is. It's a great result. I think what we're talking about is the momentum in football. The momentum shifted definitely in that second half, and they managed to score while they were on top.
Tactically, did they do something different, Matt? Phil was talking about extra possession of the ball, because they were a little overrun by 10-man Colombia in the first half.
They were. They had to get to grips in the midfield, which for me is one of the strongest areas of their team, and they didn't do that in the first half. But I think you can't underestimate how difficult and how hard Colombia worked to get back into the game. They were very impressive in the first half after going down, and Japan just eventually ground them down and had control of the game in the second half.
And that goal came from Osaka. It was one of those we had a look at before, and it was a prolonged period of pressure, wasn't it, from the Japanese when they got that crucial goal that gave them the win in the end.
It was, and you know, Osaka I thought was fantastic for Japan. He caused problems for Sanchez. It's another set piece in the tournament. Poor defending from Arias, the right back of Colombia. Just come off the line there, Osaka. I'm not so sure about the position of Ospina. You know, he seemed to be in no man's land for me, and all he did, Osaka, was just come off the 6-yard box, just guide it into the bottom left-hand corner. You see Ospina there, nowhere, he's in no man's land, and it was a brilliant header.
There's nobody being aggressive there to head the ball, is there? Arias, he's just not complete. You see him, he doesn't really get off the ground. He makes contact, but there's no genuine attempt to go and head the ball. You're in the 6-yard box, you've got to be more dominant than that.
But they deserved it because they was on top at that point. They found their way. They went back to their strengths. What are we good at? Being calm, composed on the ball, and they played their way back into the game.
You talked about another free kick. It's actually 57% of the goals in this World Cup have been scored from set pieces. I know a lot of those have been penalties, but it does seem to be that would be the highest if it stays that way. Highest percentage of goals scored from set pieces over all the World Cups we've ever played.
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't surprise me because it's such a huge, important part of the game, both offensively and defending them. So, you know, that statistic doesn't surprise me at all. What about the threat from Japan throughout the game? You talked a lot about Osaka, but Inui was there. I know we saw a pretty awful effort in the first half, but he was at the centre of much of the good work from Japan.
He was, and we spoke a bit before the game about him playing on that left-hand side, but he always ends up coming in field, and look, his shooting boots in the first half weren't there. That went out for a throw-in. This was in the second half. Look at him. We said how he was always in contact. He just rolled Sanchez there, Osaka. And it's poor defending, but a good save from Ospina.
Yeah, it was really poor from Sanchez. I mean, he got caught out a couple of times today. Like we saw earlier on the goal, and there, he just didn't quite look at the races today.
And we're talking about a player here that wasn't nailed on to even start this game. I think he's made 25 appearances, and most of them have come from a substitute appearance. So he's definitely played his way and laid down a marker for the next couple of games in this team.
This is Inui on the left-hand side. Again, driving inside. He loves to come in on his right foot. Again, that was Sanchez in the way. But because in the second half, Colombia went deep, Japan stretched the play on both sides, playing wide. Nagatomo going in behind there. They just controlled the second half by playing simple football and keeping possession of the ball.
Sanchez is really highly rated, isn't he? Is there a reason, do you think, why he was a little off the pace today? Did it have something to do with the early red card for the fellow who plays in the side, the other Sanchez in the side?
I would say it affected him. I think he's 22. You know, those type of mistakes of that magnitude in a game like this can affect you. And if you can't manage to kind of eject that thought from your head, it can end up affecting the rest of your game. And he just looked a little bit laboured to me and not quite at the races.
We can see the opening goal because, I mean, 3 minutes in and the complexion of the game completely changed, Alex.
Absolutely, we see it here. And his attributes, he's so fast and physical, and he does actually have a yard on Azako here, but he just doesn't read the bounce of the ball. And at Tottenham all season, he mops this sort of thing off, but he's just muscled off the ball, which we hardly see.
I think it's his starting position. I mean, Alex mentioned it before the game. His starting position was all wrong. Kagawa gets the ball there. I think as a centre-back, you've got to deepen. Yeah. Even though he's quick.
Yeah, but he still has the opportunity, though, Phil, doesn't he? I take what you're saying. He could be better, but even so, he's got a yard to play with this.
Yeah, but you're gambling. And I think as a defender, you don't want your centre-backs to gamble. You want to get deeper, read the play, give yourself that 2 or 3 yards. He didn't do that, as Okuzaku did really well.
And at what point should he be repositioning himself then?
The minute that Kagawa gets the ball, I think he's got to retreat because Kagawa's got time on the ball. It was a clear handball from Sanchez. I mean, he's devastated because it's a World Cup game. He goes off. For me, it wasn't a great penalty from Kagawa. He gets straight down the middle, not much power, but he sticks in the back of the net. And you know what? It was a brilliant start to the game.
I think the most disappointing thing for Colombia today was that Japan didn't have to work very hard to score their goals, did they? I mean, Colombia gave good appearance, but if you look at both the goals, they didn't have to do a lot to score, and I think it's a real disappointment for Colombia.
Quintero was a bit of a star for them, particularly in that first half. We saw flashes of Falcao, didn't we? And he was the man who actually, great work to win a free kick, which Quintero actually levelled things up from in that first half.
Yeah, he was doing this all game. Falcao. He was constantly looking for the contact.
He knows what he's doing there, doesn't he?
He absolutely knows. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not a side of the game that I like, but I have to respect almost the experience and the know-how to get your team back in the game. They were up against it. He clearly just makes contact there, doesn't he? And he wins the free kick where the goal comes from.
He absolutely buys that free kick, and like you said, that's the experience. But this is so clever. It's either come from the coaching staff or the player doing their homework to know that the Japanese players in free kicks, they jump, and that's very clever play.
You know when we talked about coaching detail, it was brilliant coaching detail, but the actual execution still is absolutely fantastic because it's not easy to get the power on the ball underneath the wall, the confidence to do it. I mean, it doesn't go in with that much speed. I can't believe the keeper's saying it didn't go in. You've got goal line technology there.
He's going to try, though. He's going to
try. Got no chance. We used to call that a P-roller in the school.
Yeah. In cricket, it's a P-roller, isn't it?
And Falcao, we saw some of his brilliance in the first half. We got to see about half an hour of the man who won the Golden Boot in the last World Cup, James Rodriguez. And there's one opportunity he had which could have drawn things level at 2-2.
He should have done better. It was a brilliant defending from our centre-forward for Japan, Okuzaku, who had a fantastic game. This was James. He starts on the right-hand side, he goes into the middle, and when it falls to him, you think to yourself, this is your moment, this is why you were the Golden Boot winner. Brilliant defending. He just throws himself at it, the centre-forward from Japan. You think that is a certain goal from that distance. Brilliant defending.
What a place for your centre-forward to be at that stage in the game to make a tackle like that. It was a brilliant play.
Carlos Valderrama watching.
He wasn't bad.
I was once in a hotel, ridiculous thing to say, but I was in a hotel in Brazil, World Cup draw a few years ago, and I was stood behind someone in the queue for an omelette, and I thought, that looks a bit like Carlos Valderrama. And it was Carlos Valderrama. In case you're interested, he had mushrooms, ham and cheese.
Good story. Any more funny stories?
No more funny stories. That's the end of those. I've got plenty more Valderrama tales where that came from. Overall, do you think, because of after those 3 minutes, Colombia would have been happy with the point if they'd been able to get that out of the game, having gone down to 10 men so early?
Yeah, I think they would have been happy with the point. They retreated in the second half. The energy went out the team. They didn't get hold of the ball. Quintero went off. James came on. They didn't really have an effect on the game. And I think in the second half they were hanging on. They were hanging on for that point.
Do you think, though, at that point, though, the momentum shifted, but then the Colombian coach was actually brave and he was throwing on attacking players. Maybe at that point he's like, OK, we've not got control of this game. Maybe I do need to be happy with the draw and bring on more defensive players.
His substitutions were actually really positive. Baka and Rodriguez came on. I just wonder whether he should have just retreated, put a couple of holding midfield players on and said, right, we've got down to 10 men,
and
get the point.
Poland and Senegal, the other two teams in that team, it puts Colombia under quite a bit of pressure now, but Japan find themselves in a great position, doesn't it?
Great position. It's a classic. You win that first game, going into the second one, it gives you a massive lift. But I just think it's a really difficult group. When you look at some difficult customers in that group, some real different playing styles, and Colombia's next game is going to be tough.
And England's opponent at some stage could, if they get through, of course.
When we get through.
Yeah. When? All right. you're not allowed to throw we's around.
Yes, we are.
You are.
I work for the FA.
Now, before the start of the World Cup, there was a little doom and gloom about how well the hosts would do. Despite that, if they beat Egypt tonight, Russia will be all but sure of their place in the last 16. This is how the locals feel about how their team have started the tournament. For you, and on the iPlayer, they take on Egypt, who are likely to be eliminated if they lose that one. Hopefully Mo Salah will play, though. Before that, the final game of the opening round of fixtures sees Poland take on Senegal. That's in the same group as Colombia and Japan. That's live on 5 Live. Queen's Tennis is over on BBC Two now. Andy Murray due to make his first appearance on a tennis court after a year of pretty much being injured for most of that. So it'll be good to see Andy Murray back in preparation for Wimbledon as well. We talked about Japan making a great start to the group. I mean, we all saw, I think when we first arrived in Russia, front page of the Moscow Times, is all doom and gloom about the host nation. And yet 5-0 over, let's be honest, a pretty poor Saudi Arabia side. But, Alex, it's completely changed the whole mood of the football-watching nation, isn't it?
It really has, and now you see there's a different mood in Moscow, in Russia, that there's that belief. And this is a great opportunity going into this game against Egypt. You get the win, more or less you're guaranteed to go through, but then you actually flip it. Egypt coming into this game, big pressure game because they need the 3 points.
South Africa are the only hosts who've ever failed to get out of the group since we've had groups at a World Cup. But however bad they've been in recent games, I think it was 1 win in 10 going into this. That changes the complexion of everything, even though it was a pretty weak opposition.
It does. It's given them a little bit of momentum. I don't think the Russian supporters can believe that first performance. And I think from a tournament point of view, we're here in Moscow, we actually need them to stay in the competition. I think there's a real feel-good factor around them. I don't think they're the best side, but I think they're in a group where they get a result tonight, I think they can go through.
Just watching that back as well, we talk about the opposition. They have some great goals, weren't they? I mean, some of the finishes and the free kick, some excellent goals.
Cherchesov actually had a call from Putin, didn't he, after the game, to say congratulations to him and to congratulate the players as well. And I think you talked about, and this is Putin with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia after the game, and the boss of FIFA in the middle there. You're talking about the fact that it's changed the way people look at the game, but it is really important, the point that Phil made. If you have the host in the tournament, it keeps that home nation engrossed in the World Cup, and that can make a whole difference to the next few weeks here in Russia, can't it?
Completely, as the country will be behind it. Think about it. You just got to flip it and think about what that would be like at home. You know, if we hosted a World Cup and England were in it as far as they could go, the buzz around the country would just be immense.
And then when you flip it to Egypt, though, the gamble is Mo Salah 100% fit. But I think they need to gamble and throw him in there because they need to win this game.
Can you hear that rain, by the way? It's been sort of 25, 26, 27 degrees the last few days. The umbrellas are out in Red Square. That is the first bit of rain we had since we've arrived in Moscow. And you can see people darting for cover. We've been promised that the weather would change. Loads of Moroccans in Red Square. They take on Portugal tomorrow at the Luzhniki Stadium. And they are disappearing before our very eyes there, hiding under their umbrellas and getting ready. Well, the poster boy for this World Cup isn't one of the current Russian squad, but one of the true legends of the game. This is the story of Lev Yashin. He was some player and still so greatly admired here in Russia as well. Sorry about the noise. We are in the midst of a tropical storm here in Moscow. You can see Red Square is almost entirely clear behind us, people running under the trees. It's been beautiful weather for the last week, but it has suddenly changed, and no one here has bought either a coat or an umbrella. Is that right?
Feels like we're back in Manchester.
This is very familiar for you.
You said you wanted a ham sandwich earlier. There you go.
We've talked about the Russian perspective. You mentioned Mo Salah. Do they risk Egypt? I mean, if they lose, they're potentially out of the World Cup. Do they risk their best player with a dodgy shoulder, do you think, Matt, in this game?
Yes.
They've got to.
Because what you mentioned, if they don't win, really, they're potentially going to be out of the World Cup. So you've brought him along. He's part of the squad. They're talking like he's fit and he's available. He has to play.
I hope we really see him off the back of what a fantastic season he has had.
I can't hear a word you're saying.
He's had a fantastic season. We would love to see an appearance from him.
I genuinely can't hear you.
I think what Alex said was that we want the best players to play in a World Cup. He's had such a good season. You want him to play on the biggest stage. Egypt need him to produce a performance, or else they're on the way up.
Whatever you said was excellent, Phil. Just to let you know, by the way, as well, FIFA have said, one bit of news for you, FIFA have said they are now going to investigate VAR because of the incidents with Harry Kane last night. So there'll be somebody watching the VAR, watching the game, I think, to try and make sure that it is used as it should be going forward after those incidents with Harry Kane yesterday.
Well, they have to look at something, because I think pre-tournament they said they were going to crack down on the grappling in the areas. We saw it last night 2 or 3 times, and they need to do something, because England could have had 2 or 3 penalties. It could have cost us a lot last night. I know you can't hear what I'm saying, but it's really good. and it's good that they're looking at it.
Some of your best work there, Phil.
Yeah.
Some of your best work.
Referees are constantly being assessed. So why is it going to be different for a video-assisted referee? You know, they need to be looked at to make sure they're doing their job properly.
as if by magic, the rain has slightly subsided, so I think I can hear things now. Thank you so much for sharing the afternoon with us. I'm not sure what the weather is going to be like a little bit later on, but it's been a pleasure. Thank you. We've seen Japan win their first game at the World Cup. We've seen Colombia, who got to the quarterfinals last time out, struggle in their first game. That is it from us. We should be back for Russia against Egypt a little bit later on. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Sarko chasing that little play forward from Shinji Kagawa. Oh, handball penalty and a red card. Kagawa against David Ospina. 1-0 Japan. With a touch. Oh, Falcao is unlucky into Kawashima. Quintero under the wall. Oh, it's gone in. It's 1-1. Honda's corner. Off the inside of the post and into the back of the net.